Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive with us.
Always fun to be back.
Today, we're going to be looking at some more words. Some more
Yeah.
of these words we use all the time, but maybe don't give a whole lot of thought to.
Right.
So we've got 4 today, and we'll kind of dig into them and see what we can find.
Yeah.
Speak out, lament, bump into, and nostalgia.
Ooh, those are good ones.
Yeah, I'm excited for these.
Me too.
Let's kick things off with speak out. We hear this phrase all the time, but what do you think really makes it stand out from just speaking?
That's a good question.
Mm.
I think speak out. There's like an implication that you're taking a risk.
Ooh.
When you speak out, there's a chance that you're going against the grain.
Right.
You're going to face some pushback.
You're putting yourself out there.
Yeah, definitely. And that takes courage.
And to speak out is to have courage.
I think so. Yeah. It's like you're standing up for something you believe in.
And that brings to mind the quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing."
Right.
So speak out is like the opposite of that. It's taking action,
Absolutely. It's like using your voice to make a
It
difference.
can make a difference.
Yeah.
So are we saying that speak out isn't just about talking, but it's about actually making change happen?
I think so. It's about having an impact,
Wow. I never thought of it quite like that.
It's powerful stuff.
So do you think this phrase speak out, has it always had this power behind it?
I have to think about that. The words themselves are pretty straightforward, speak and out. But together, they create this idea of really projecting your voice being heard.
Like making sure you're heard.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder how that's evolved, through history.
Oh, yeah, like alongside those big social movements.
Right, exactly.
Think about the civil rights movement or women's suffrage, even online activism today.
It's incredible how much impact 2 little words can have.
Seriously, just 2 words?
It's inspiring.
Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit and move on to a word with a very different feel.
Okay.
Lament.
Lament.
What comes to mind when you hear that word?
For me, lament is just sadness, like a deep sorrow. It's heavy.
It's not a light word, is it?
No, it's definitely not something you use lightly.
Have you ever had to lament something or seen someone else in a situation where they were experiencing lamentation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all experience it in different ways, right? I've definitely felt it personally,
Yeah.
Times of loss or heartbreak.
Yeah.
But then you see it on a larger scale, too, like with national tragedies
Right.
or responding to some kind of injustice in the world. And there's a sense of community always in that shared grief.
It's like coming together, yeah.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think about the visuals after tragedies,
Yeah.
Just a lot of lamentation, but also support.
Right. It's powerful.
So we've talked about how different cultures, have different ways of expressing things. What about lament? How does that look across different cultures?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Some cultures have really specific rituals
Right.
for mourning, while others are more internal.
Yeah.
But that underlying feeling of loss, that's universal.
So there are different expressions, but the root of it's the same.
Exactly.
That's interesting how language and culture are so intertwined.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Lament. I know has Latin roots. Can you tell us a bit more about where this word comes from?
Sure, so it comes from the Latin word lamentare, which literally means to weep or wail.
Oh, wow.
So the word itself is kind of like a cry of sorrow.
It's almost onomatopoeia, isn't it?
Right.
And that makes me think about earlier when we were talking about speak out and how it seemed to become more common during social movements.
Yeah.
Do you think the use of lament has changed over time, too?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know for sure, but it makes you wonder if maybe it's become more common in art and literature as a way to process like collective trauma or to give a voice to those who are often silenced.
That makes a lot of sense because art and literature can be such powerful outlets for those difficult emotions.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about language. It gives us the tools to express the full range of human experience.
Even the painful parts.
Right. Even the painful parts, lament, reminds us that it's okay to grieve, to mourn.
To feel those things.
Yeah, to acknowledge the weight of sorrow.
And that's such an important message, especially today, when we often try to push those feelings away.
Exactly. Lament gives us permission to feel them.
To just sit with them.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've talked about the courage of speaking out and the depth of lament. Are you ready for something a little lighter?
Oh, yeah. Let's lighten things up. Where are we headed?
Let's talk about bumping into something.
Okay.
You know that feeling when you're walking down the street just lost in thought and suddenly, bam, you run into someone you haven't seen in forever?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Like the universe is playing a little trick on you.
A little cosmic joke.
Yeah. It's always a fun surprise.
It really is, and it can totally make your day.
Definitely. It just injects a little bit of joy into your routine.
Why do you think that is what's so great about these chance encounters?
I think it's the unexpectedness of it. Life can be so predictable.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you have this connection that just pops up out of nowhere.
And it reminds you that anything is possible.
Right, exactly. And bump into, it just perfectly captures that feeling.
It really does.
It's not just about seeing someone you know. It's about that element of surprise.
the collision.
Yeah, the collision.
So the phrase itself comes from literally bumping into something, right?
Right.
But I'm curious, how did it evolve to describe social interactions?
That is interesting. I wonder if it started as a more playful way to describe those chance meetings.
Oh, that makes sense. Like drawing a parallel between a physical bump and the surprise of seeing someone.
Yeah, and it takes something that could be awkward, bumping into someone,
Right.
and turns it into something positive.
I love that.
It's a nice way to look at it.
Speaking of awkward, I have a confession.
Oh.
I'm so clumsy. I'm always bumping into things, and people really, I get lost in my head and don't pay attention to my surroundings.
Uh-huh. I think we've all been there.
That's true. But back to bumping into, people, are there any other phrases you can think of that have a similar meaning?
Let's see, there's run into,
Yeah.
which feels a little more hurried.
Like you're both on the go.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's come across, which is more like stumbling upon something by chance.
Like finding a treasure.
Exactly.
I like those. But you're right. Bump into just has that playfulness to it.
It does.
It's a good reminder to embrace those unexpected moments.
Definitely, life is full of them.
All right, so we've covered the courage of speaking out, the weight of lament, and the delight of bumping into someone you know.
This has been quite the journey.
It really has. Are you ready for our final word?
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
Nostalgia.
Nostalgia.
Close your eyes for a second and let your mind wander back to a favorite memory from your past. A happy memory.
Right.
Maybe a childhood vacation or a holiday tradition or just a moment that makes you smile. What comes to mind?
Ooh. I think for me, it's the smell of my grandmother's kitchen.
Oh,
Fresh baked bread cinnamon rolls. It takes me right back to Sunday mornings at her house.
that's lovely. And it really gets at the heart of nostalgia, doesn't it? That longing for the past, those happy memories.
Yeah, it does. Why do you think nostalgia has that bittersweet quality to it?
That's a good question. On the one hand, it's warm and comforting,
Right.
but there's also that sadness, because you can't go back.
Exactly. It's like you're trying to hold on to something that's slipping away.
Yeah, and that can be beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time.
It's complex.
So why do you think humans are so drawn to the past? Is there a reason for that?
There are some theories out there.
Really?
Yeah, some researchers think it might be evolutionary,
Oh, wow.
helping us build social bonds and cope with stress.
Tell me more about that.
Well, when we share those happy memories with others,
Yeah.
it creates a connection and a sense of shared history.
It brings people together.
Yeah, and when we're feeling down, thinking about those good times can be comforting.
Like reaching for a warm blanket on a cold night.
Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
our brains are wired to find comfort in the past.
But what about the word nostalgia itself? Where does it come from?
So if we break it down to its Greek roots, we find nostos, which means returning home,
Okay.
and algos, which means pain.
So originally it was more about homesickness.
Exactly, that longing to return to a place where you belong.
But now it's broadened to include any kind of longing for the past.
Right, a place, a time, a feeling.
That's fascinating how the meaning has changed over time.
Language is always evolving, isn't it?
It really is. But before we get too carried away with the beauty of language, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back to continue our exploration of nostalgia and wrap up our deep dive into these 4 fascinating words.
I can't wait.
Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. It's great to have you with us again as we continue to unpack these fascinating words.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how much depth there is to these terms we use every day.
Right before the break, we were talking about nostalgia and its roots in that feeling of homesickness.
Yeah, longing for home.
Well, but it seems like nowadays it's gone way beyond just missing a place, right?
Oh, definitely. It's become so much more than that.
It can be about missing a time, a feeling, a sensory experience.
Like a specific smell or sound.
Exactly. Like, I get nostalgic for the sound of dial-up internet connecting.
Really?
I know it sounds weird, but that sound takes me right back.
I get that it's like those little things that trigger a memory.
Exactly. And it's different for everyone, right?
Oh, absolutely. What might seem totally random to one person can be super meaningful to someone else.
So it's all about those personal associations.
Yeah, and that's what makes nostalgia so powerful, I think.
You know, it's interesting how much nostalgia is used in marketing these days.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like all those retro products and campaigns that try to make us long for the good old days.
Right. They're trying to tap into that feeling of comfort and familiarity.
So they're selling us a feeling, not just a product.
Exactly. And it often works because who doesn't want to feel good?
But is there a downside to all this nostalgia?
That's a good question. I think there can be.
Like, what if we get so caught up in the past that we forget to live in the present?
Right. It's important to remember that the past wasn't always perfect.
And we don't want to get stuck there.
No, we need to keep moving forward.
So how do we find that balance between appreciating the past without letting it consume us?
I think it's about being mindful, you know?
Mindful.
Yeah, like it's okay to reminisce and enjoy those memories,
Right.
but we need to be aware of when it's starting to hold us back.
So maybe it's helpful to think of nostalgia as a tool.
Ooh, I like that.
It can be a tool for connection, for comfort, for creativity.
Right.
But like any tool, it can be misused.
Exactly. It's about using it consciously.
This conversation has really got me thinking about all the words we've looked at today.
Me too.
There's this common thread of how language shapes our reality.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
Whether we're speaking out against injustice, lamenting a loss, or finding comfort in nostalgia.
Language helps us make sense of it all.
It's like words are the building blocks of our thoughts and emotions.
And the more we understand those building blocks, the better we can communicate and connect with each other.
So true. So to wrap things up, what are some key takeaways you want to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious about language.
Curious.
Yeah, pay attention to the words you use every day. Look up their origins, their different meanings.
Don't take them for granted.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to play with language, experiment, try new things.
Like writing poetry or song lyrics.
Exactly. The more you engage with language, the more you'll discover its beauty and power.
And it can really enrich your life.
Absolutely.
So on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring these 4 fascinating words with us.
And we hope you'll keep those word nerd senses tingling.
Until next time, happy word nerding, everybody. Well, we've made it. It's the end of another deep dive, and we've covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
We have. It's been great.
Yeah, going from, speak out and all the courage that implies to like the bittersweet feeling of nostalgia.
It's amazing how much these words can tell us about ourselves.
I know. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how language works.
Me too.
So let's kind of recap here. What were some of the big aha moments for you during this deep dive?
Well, I think for me, the biggest one was realizing just how much courage it takes to speak out.
Right.
You know,
Right.
It's not just about expressing your opinion. It's about standing up for what you believe in, even when it's hard.
And that ties in with lament too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because it takes courage to acknowledge those feelings of grief and loss.
To let yourself be vulnerable.
Exactly. And our society doesn't always make space for that.
No, it doesn't. But lament reminds us that it's okay to feel those things.
It's part of being human.
And then there's bump into, which is such a delightful phrase.
It really is.
It reminds us that sometimes the best things in life are unexpected.
You just never know who or what you're going to encounter.
And, speaking of the unexpected, I was really surprised to learn that nostalgia originally meant homesickness.
Yeah, me too. It's fascinating how words can change their meaning over time,
It shows how language is always evolving.
like a living thing.
So before we say goodbye, what advice would you give to our listeners who want to keep exploring the world of words?
Well, I would say first and foremost, stay curious.
Curious.
Yeah, don't just accept words at face value.
Right.
Dig a little deeper. Think about their history, their origins, the different ways they could be used.
And don't be afraid to get creative with language.
Exactly. Try writing poetry or song lyrics or even just playing around with different words in your everyday conversations.
The more you engage with language, the more you'll discover its power. Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
It's been a fun one.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring these 4 fascinating words with us.
And we hope you'll join us again next time for another deep dive into the world of language.
Until then, happy word nerding, everybody.